Do you ever feel like you're being gaslighted or ghosted by someone?
Wow, it sure has felt like that over the last couple of years, especially. We've heard trust the science and question the science. And wow, just the last couple of years and even through the pandemic really put a new light on that for so many people.
It did, and now we're finding these January 6 videos being released to the public and seeing just how bad we were gaslit.
Yeah.
So the media is guilty of it. The government is guilty of it. But it's not just the government. It's not just the media. It can be companies or industries that want to lead people astray. We've got Pfizer and...
But Michelle, remember when we were in Cuba, we were told over and over and over again that there is no propaganda in Cuba because it's illegal.
Oh, that's right.
Wow. You're listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees. We're back here in the studio today. We're going to be talking about some of the gaslighting that is going on all around us in everyday life, in all areas of life. It's not just restrained to the government. It's not just restrained to the pandemic. It's not just restrained to what we're seeing in the news. It's happening in many areas of life. It's history repeating itself.
Yes, John, you were mentioning that oftentimes we try to think, oh, we're evolving. Society is getting better. We're so much more intelligent. Look, we have these cell phones in our hand. We have all this wonderful technology. But the nature of man is the same. So whether we have the technology or don't, the very nature, our motives, our greed, whatever it is that mankind is subject to, those are still very relevant.
Yeah, and that reminds me of something our friend Rabbi Lappin says, that the more things change, the more we need to rely on the things that never change. There are certain things that never change.
You know, years ago, I was reading a book by a theologian out of Holland, and he was saying, you know, when God took Moses up on the mountain, he could have told him about nuclear physics and rocket science and, you know, all the bacteria theory that we have now. But he didn't. He gave him 10 regulations, 5 of them that deal with our relationship with him, and the other 5 that deal with our relationship with our fellow man.
10 Commandments.
It wasn't that God didn't know all that. It was that era didn't need it. And so he gave him principles that would last eternity because of what you said, Michelle. Human nature is human nature and always will be human nature. And so we see today people that are being ghosted. We see people that are being gaslit by people that they shouldn't be if they were very, very sensitive to understanding how human nature works.
Well, can you break those terms down for us a little bit? Ghosting, being ghosted or gaslit. What does that mean exactly?
Well, ghosting takes place, typically it's kind of a social media term where all of a sudden people just stop communicating with you, period, and you don't hear from them again.
Okay.
So someone that was supposed to be your friend, someone that was, you know, you were having these deep social media conversations with, all of a sudden just doesn't return anything. They're out of your life. That's ghosting.
So in our industry, we see that happen when people contact us and say, hey, I bought a policy, but now my agent, they won't talk to me.
They won't even answer my calls.
Yeah, I ask questions and they don't say anything. So that can kind of be a ghosting, and that happens sometimes the agent doesn't even know the answers to the questions they're asking. And some agents are focused on just making the sale and no relationship afterwards. So that can kind of be a ghosting in the insurance industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, gaslighting comes from the 1944 film that Ingrid Bergman starred in, where her husband makes her look like she's going insane, and he isolates her from the world and tells her lies and deceives her into thinking that all these things that he's causing to happen to her are really because she's going crazy, that she's a kleptomaniac, because these things are getting stolen. And so that happens when, we're told information that just isn't true and makes us believe a lie. And many agents are doing that today. They're explaining how life insurance works in a make-believe world, and they're giving people reason to believe something that isn't so. It makes me think of what Will Rogers said years ago. The problem in America isn't so much what people know. or don't know. The problem is what people think they know that just ain't so. And so there's a lot of misinformation out there that people think they know that just ain't so.
Yeah. Well, here in the last 3 years, we heard trust the science a lot.
Oh my goodness, yes.
But if you look back, in history, people like Galileo or Copernicus.
Yes.
Galileo, who questioned Aristotle's theory of gravity, different weighted objects would drop at different speeds according to Aristotle, but not, according to the experiment Galileo did in his famous experiment where he dropped the two different objects off the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
He was not well received.
He was not well received, and they continued teaching Aristotle's theory, even though he had proven it wrong. That was the science of the day. And so he was persecuted because of that. Copernicus was the one who said that, who formed the theory that the Earth revolved around the sun instead of the other way around. Before that, so many people thought that everything revolved around the Earth, and what happened here.
The funny thing is, and it's not really funny, but it wasn't until the 20th century that the Catholic Church actually forgave Galileo and said, "Oh, we made a mistake."
Interesting.
So how many years did they propagandize? Hundreds of years against him by the edict that the Pope put down on him.
Yeah.
And that's
so it's interesting. The advancement of true science comes by questioning the science and not just by trusting what has been established as...
And that's because science isn't truth. Science is a journey. It's an exploration. Solomon tells us in Ecclesiastes that it is God's purpose to hide a matter, and it's man's duty to search it out. And so we will never on this earth know all of what God has hidden as long as we search, but it's our duty to keep doing that. And that's what science really is.
Well, and I think too, in many states, the pandemic, the wearing of masks, then they said, oh yeah, they'll lift a little bit of mask wearing when you had to walk into a restaurant with a mask on, walk to your table with the mask on, but once you sat down, you could take the mask off.
Or going through TSA, you have to lift your mask up to show them your face because they don't know who you are without it.
That's right. Or you have to keep social distancing in the airport, even in the, what's it called? The sky, what is it?
The sky
skywalk
bridge.
or the sky bridge from the building to the airplane. They have signs to this day that say to social distance. And then you get on the plane and sit on top of each other practically. So, and those of us who understand the germ theories or something about germs, and we're thinking, do the germs not attack us if we're sitting down and eating at the table? Oh, and some of the restaurants said, some of the states said, if you're sitting at your table and you're not eating, you have to have the mask on. But if you are eating, the mask can come off. Just some crazy rules. And we were scratching our head going, whoa, wait a minute. That's an example of gaslighting. So you have examples in your everyday life. You've experienced this. So sometimes we have to take that information and apply it to other situations. Am I being gaslighted in another area? Let me think. Slow down and think.
Another area of gaslighting is when we were told that the vaccination was supposed to prevent you from getting COVID. Then we were told when that didn't work, it's to help keeping it from spreading to you giving it to someone else. And finally, it was for the fact that it was to slow down the variants that could be evolved from this. And now we find out all of that has been false. All of it has been false because recently the information has come out that if you've had all 5 boosters, every booster has increased your risk of mortality by 7%. So you got all 5 boosters, you have a 35% more risk of dying than you did if you hadn't had the vaccination at all.
And you said that has been substantiated now by studies both in the U.S. and the U.K.
In the UK, it was medically, and in the United States, it was insurance companies, analysts looking at the data to see how it's going to affect their insurance rates.
Interesting.
They know the money, follow the money. They know they're not going to be on the hook for this.
Interesting.
Somehow.
So I was thinking today, we had a client who was asking a question, came in, and here we answer our clients' questions. If we don't know the answer, we'll go find it out. But we very often know the answers to their questions, and we have to think of a way to communicate it so that they understand it, because not everyone understands things the exact same way. One of our listeners to the podcast was telling me that. I like hearing the different perspectives because it helps me understand it better.
It brings out a deeper, what's the word I'm looking for? A deeper perspective.
Sure.
Different perspective.
So anyway, this morning when I heard of this person's question, and I heard of some other questions as well, I just thought of that song, Jeremiah Peabody's, was it polyunsaturated, quick dissolving, fast acting, pleasant tasting green and purple pills. And if you're not familiar with it, they're trying to sell this wonder drug that cures all your ills. You just send off your money. It will help you with neuritis and neuralgia and head cold and stress, sinus drainage, problems with your blood, if you're overweight or if you're sneezing or have injuries, anything. Jeremiah Peabody's polyunsaturated, blah, 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 will cure it. And sometimes in the marketplace, we're told, oh, take this, it'll cure everything. Buy this, it will be the wonder drug that you need. Put a mask on. It's all the answers to everything. But that really just ain't so.
It ain't so.
And whole life insurance, it is a great product. It is great in and of itself. We don't have to attribute fictitious features and make up crazy features and ideas about it. To sell this polyunsaturated drug.
Well,
that's a great song. I think it's Ray Stevens that does that,
yes,
isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Look up the song. Listen to it if you haven't heard of it.
It's great because we've seen it throughout history.
Yeah.
They had the snake oil salesmen all throughout history, and here we are, just another part of history. Our snake oil salesmen look a little different. They're peddling something a little different, but sometimes it is snake oil.
Yeah.
And
really
we
sad.
can examine it. And that's what I love, too, about whole life insurance. We can look at the guaranteed values to know exactly what it will provide. There's some non-guaranteed values that may happen. That's nice. But the guaranteed values tell us exactly what's going to happen. It's a contract.
So, John, years ago, I was talking to someone about the guaranteed values in whole life. And they came back and they said, well, how can they guarantee it? So how do they guarantee those?
Well, one of the ways that they guarantee it is that the insurance companies have to keep fairly large reserves on whole life insurance products as compared to other types of products that they sell. So those reserves help bring some liquidity to the picture, but they look at the actuary science, how long are people going to live, and they work out those numbers ahead of time so that they can make that guarantee. Based on what premiums that they collect, what investments they can make, what they know the expenses of running the company will be, what they know the mortality rates are going to be. They can predict that with a very high degree of accuracy, and that's how they're able to provide us the guarantee.
So let's talk about those reserves a little bit. What is a reserve? Where is it kept? What does it do? How does it benefit the company?
So a reserve at a life insurance company is money that they have to keep in fairly liquid form. So they can't go out and invest it in just anything. They have to keep it very liquid so that it's available to pay death benefits for policies that come in, and also to make policy loans when the policy owner wants to take a loan on their policy. So that's money that they can't lend out and invest.
So it's kind of like their emergency fund.
Very, very similar.
On a personal level, that just stuck maybe away in a coffee can or the freezer, or maybe some very low interest bearing account.
Right.
But they're not able to go out and invest and make 10, 12, 15% on that money.
Not at all.
They're probably making somewhere around one or just like everyone else is in a savings account.
Which brings up a great point, because with the era of low interest rates that we've just come off of, insurance companies haven't been making a lot of money on those reserves. So that has been a very low profit activity. We may see that change a little bit as interest rates are going up. They have some greater opportunities in that that area. But that is one reason that that pressures insurance companies, maybe not to offer whole life insurance products or to promote them as heavily, is because they know they have to keep so much in reserves. And when in an era where they weren't earning a whole lot on that, that's a risk for the insurance company.
And they have to keep that reserve because they have a contract that they are going to pay when there is a death. And so, they want to make sure that they have that money on hand, where some of the products that they're excited about promoting now, like the index universal life insurance that we often talk about as the opposite of the kind of the enemy out there, they don't have to have reserves for that because they don't guarantee that product long term.
Yeah, and this is interesting. There was a person from one of the insurance companies that we work with who was reading your blog just recently, Dad, and he wrote to you about this, about some of the reserves.
He did, and I had written about the index universal product and how it's the thing to sell, being promoted heavily. It's risen in its sales tremendously over the last few years, and how that it just can't provide the guaranteed values that whole life does.
And it's being promoted very heavily.
It's being promoted very heavily. And he said that it was an excellent article, but maybe that we needed to touch on the fact that it's the reserve factor that the insurance companies are most concerned about, because not having to have as many dollars put away in that little emergency fund that's earning very, very little money, they now can take that money out and go and they can invest and speculate and get higher returns someplace else. It reminds me
potentially.
This is a concept I've been thinking about for a while. It reminds me a lot of CRT, the critical race theory that's being propagated today. All of a sudden, we've got a group of people that want to go back and they want to rewrite history because it's going to profit them. Now, whole life insurance is the only insurance product that is something that was developed by the demand of the consumer. The public said, no, we're not going to buy the stuff that we just keep paying the insurance company money and we don't get anything in our lifetime for it. We're tired of this. We want something that we get equity in.
Yeah.
And so the insurance companies came up with this whole life insurance product, even with the fact that, we'll even share the profits that we make off your premiums with you. And that's a dividend or participating whole life insurance. So that's worked well for hundreds of years, just like our Constitution has made America thrive. And now all of a sudden someone comes up with this far-fetched idea that CRT or IUL is going to really be better than what we've been taught. And yet it's not. It's causing people heartache. It's causing people financial losses. It's putting them in risks that they don't understand. And even the Center for Economic Justice, that nonprofit organization, says, stay away from this IUL stuff. Recently here in San Francisco, there was a group of people that came up, because of CRT and all this bad stuff that really happened that's really just fictitious. We think that every person that is African American descent, they should get $5 million from the state of California. And they looked into it and they said, well, what ramifications, what science did you do, what math did you do? We didn't do that. We just came up with the idea.
So in other words, they admit it's a belief system.
They believe it's a belief system. And, that's what IUL too is. It's a belief system that the market is going to pay for the premiums that normally the insurance company would make sure that you were protected from those premiums going up. So now if the premiums do go up and the market hasn't done what you expected it, what's going to happen?
Yeah. I was looking at an indexed, this was actually an annuity, but it was an indexed product that was projecting rates between 12 and 15% return going forward over the next 10 years.
Well, John, that sounds great.
Recently. Sounds great. Looks great. But if you look back at the indexes, I don't see how that's going to happen looking forward over the next 10 years.
So
And they admit it won't in the illustrations. They always have to have those disclaimers there. But the fact that the numbers are there in the first place, it's an
deceiving.
anchor. It's an anchor. It's a belief system that's not necessarily backed up by the facts that need to be there.
So it might help us if we're overweight or sneezing or all those.
Polyunsaturated, quick dissolving, fast acting, pleasant tasting green and purple pills.
Well, I had the opportunity the other day to talk to a young man on the phone. He said, well, what about an IUL policy? What's wrong with it? Because he was thinking about buying one. I said, well, do you have the illustration that you're looking at? He said, yeah. I said, well, email it to me. So he did while we were on the phone. And I said, okay, I found the guaranteed pages. Why don't you go to, and I told him which page to go to. And we looked at, I said, okay, now where do you see the death benefit stopping on this? And he was really quiet for a long time. And then he goes, why does it do that? Because when, he's a young man, and I think it was going to stop when he was 62.
That's not that long.
That's not very long, no. And so then he wanted to know, well, then what happens to this policy? I said, well, the policy is done unless the market has, performed like they're showing you it could possibly perform. And that was a real eye opener. And then, Tom, it's interesting too. This the guy who was talking to us wrote to you about the article and reminded you, think about those reserves on the whole life insurance. It's interesting because he's working at an insurance company and often promotes IUL. And when he comes to see us or talks to us on the phone, he's always eager to say, hey, look at the IUL products. You really should be considering all this and blah, 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 blah. But then he's also turned to you and say, hey, Tom, I just, I had a windfall of money come and you'll be so pleased with me. I bought whole life insurance. He didn't go after IUL products for his own, but representing the company, he
still promotes that.
Yes, yes.
Well, until we educate ourselves and learn to be able to discern what is good versus evil, we'll always be subject to propaganda, vulnerable to it, because there's two things that motivate people, and that is fear and greed. So we're either going to be afraid that something ugly is going to happen to us if we don't know the truth, or we're going to be greedy and think that we can get something without having to work for it. Mm-hmm. And that is really what drives the sale of IUL as well.
Or even that we're going to somehow defy the odds. And somehow we're going to get those wonderful market returns, 12 to 15%. We are going to defy the odds and get that.
Yeah. The Bible tells us that solid food is for the mature, whose senses are trained by practice to discern the difference between good and evil. And we need to be aware of that and educate ourselves and become elucidated so that we aren't prey to the people that are willing to lie, deceive, or misrepresent products and end up bearing the pain and sorrow from that.
Yeah. It really is a discernment between good and evil, filtering out, what is actually the truth from all of the noise that we hear out there today. And, we just, we help people understand, index universal life insurance, understand the value of whole life insurance. That's what we do here at Life Benefits. And if you have a specific question about these products, you can always call us, 702-660-7000. If you want to take a deeper dive into how these products work, we just finished up, kind of over the last 3 or 4 podcast shows, we went through a mini series on indexed universal life insurance. We took a deep dive into how that product works, why it falls apart, at 62, like this guy's particular policy did. It'll be often somebody's 60s or 70s that these guarantees fall apart. So you can go through that, and then we also go through the value of using whole life insurance as a financial tool, along with examples of how many of our clients have used whole life insurance over the last few years. So that's spread up. That content is spread out over the last 3-4 shows. You can go back and catch that on the Wealth Talks podcast feed. But at the end of the day, what you want to be able to do is to learn to discern the truth. As you seek the truth about different concepts, different strategies that you've heard, because the truth will ultimately set you free.
Recently, we just had a client pass away. I didn't sell the policy to him because he bought it 3 years before I was born.
Wow.
But we became his servicing agent when he found us in the area after his agent had gaslighted him or ghosted him.
Actually, I think he was very excited about the financial things that you were sharing. He came, to learn about them. And so then he reached out to us, and we started helping him with his current policy, and we were able to help some of his family members.
That was a
and
good
so
policy.
that's how he came. Yeah, it was a great policy.
It was a great policy. We calculated that if he had just made an investment or put that money in saving that he had paid in premiums, he would have had to earn over 6% every year.
Wow.
To have the returns that he had in that policy and the cash values. And his death benefit when he passed was more than double of what he started with.
So was that before or after taxes and fees?
There are no taxes and fees in life insurance.
So that was a some percent rate of return. He would have had to earn higher than that in the market on a consistent
absolutely.
basis.
Oh, yes.
Over how long was this? This was like over 60 years, wasn't it?
63 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I was in communication with the family as they received that benefit, and they were very grateful for it.
Now, contrast
neat.
that to the last 20 years of what the market's done, which is somewhere around 7.5%.
You got to take taxes.
You got to pay taxes, you got to pay fees.
And it doesn't do that every year, so you're going to be riding a roller coaster that whole time. Whereas with the whole life insurance, you can count on an increase every single year if it's a well-designed policy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just recently did an analysis on 20 years of the market, and depending on what month you bought and sold in over the last 20 years, you could either have a 27% increase or a negative 40% decrease.
Wow.
And you can't just sign up, say, okay, well, I'll take the increase one.
Right. You don't know what month you're going to buy and sell.
That's a
in.
really
Yeah.
wide.
That's a huge range.
wide
So when
range,
we're
yeah.
talking about averages, it averages out to something that looks a little bit better. But averages are not what you get.
Yeah.
It sounds a little bit like, here we live just outside Las Vegas and Henderson, and people come here to gamble. And that's kind of like what that sounds, such that huge range. And people don't know for a fact when they go to the gambling table if they're going to win or lose. They're just hopeful.
Yeah.
And they are ready. Most people, I would like to think that they're ready just to walk away from the table. Of course, we know that's not always the case. But if you want to gamble with your finances, you could go to the Las Vegas and put your money down and gamble. But if you don't want to gamble with your financial future, then we recommend you get a guaranteed product. And there's nothing like whole life insurance.
And if you don't want to come to Vegas, go to New Orleans or Atlantic City or
sure.
talk to your local IUL salesman.
There you go. You can do it right from the comfort of your home.
It's a form of speculation.
I think of Jack Bogle so frequently in his book, Don't Count on It, because so many people are counting on these propaganda specularized numbers. And when they get to the point where they are going to be dependent on what they've laid aside for the future, they're very disappointed because they've been gaslit.
Yeah.
And then they're ghosted because nobody wants to talk to them that advised them.
Okay, so Tom, we were talking about ghosting, gaslighting. I think you just started another one, speculizing. I think it's speculating, but yeah, same difference.
Yeah.
And not that speculating is wrong. It just needs to be kept in perspective because there is a place for that. And we talk about that, but that's in time for another podcast.
Yeah, I talked to a guy the other day. He likes to invest in crypto, but he only puts the money into it that he can afford to lose because he realizes it's a speculation.
That's right. So it could even be kind of a hobby then.
Sure.
But he's certainly not counting on that money for his financial future.
He's not.
Yeah. So it depends what your purpose is and what your plan is to determine, how much of that you do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a place for risk. There's a place for non-risk. And I think of what Solomon talked about in Ecclesiastes. There's a time to die. There's a time to live. There's a time to, save. There's a time to spend. There are certain things that need to happen, and we need to realize that in our budgeting of our finances. Otherwise, we're going to end up on the short end of the stick.
Yeah. And I think the problem comes, when you have these different investments, whether they're speculative investments or whether you think they're safe investments. And then you contrast whole life insurance, which has a guarantee that it's going to be increasing in value every single year. The danger comes when you start to blur the lines between different types of investments, thinking, this is maybe what you once thought was a speculative investment. You start to justify it and maybe think that you understand it well enough so that it's not such speculation anymore. That becomes dangerous because you don't have that guaranteed foundation. And so people who really want to make a difference, in their investments and want to have that guaranteed foundation, they need to get their guarantees as guaranteed as possible. Get that guaranteed foundation started through life insurance or something that you can count on before that you go out and try to mix it with other types of investing.
This was the whole thing that Nassim Taleb talked about in the Black Swan. You got to have most of your eggs in the guaranteed basket. There's a certain amount that you can speculate with. And I'm always reminded of what Nelson Nash used to say when he would lecture at our events. He would say, you do an investment without life insurance, I'll take my cash values and make the same investment. Whether we win or lose, I'm going to come out better than you.
More guarantees.
Yeah.
Because I've got guarantees on the money I'm using and you don't.
Yeah. Wow, we've covered quite a little bit of ground today, from the science, trusting the science, to going through the pandemic. Many people are now questioning the science with good reason. Gone through theories and belief systems, through propaganda. So many people think of propaganda as something that's disseminated by governments, but of course it's disseminated by so many other areas of life and healthcare and financial products and the media. And we're seeing that. I think it's becoming more evident in some ways in our culture today. And it's something that we need to show discernment about, to understand the good versus the evil, to discern, the truth from the noise that's out there.
We want you to question the science because that is the scientific method. We want the questions. We don't want someone argumentatively just arguing with the science. We want thoughtful questions of why this can happen. Why is this possible? Why we want people that are looking for the truth, not just to argue, but we want those questions, because if we don't question the science, the scientific method will die and progress will cease.
That's a really good point, because so many people will ask questions just to argue. Others are really seeking for the truth. There is a big difference in the spirit that goes with those type of questions. And so make sure that you're approaching, the whole questioning thing with the right spirit, with the right attitude, because if you're seeking for the truth, you'll find it.
That's interesting that you said that too, because we've been talking a lot about this, even in our family, about those who seek find. Mm-hmm. And if we're seeking for the truth, we're more likely to find the truth. If we're seeking for something else, we will find that something else. And so if you're looking for the truth, though, we'd love to be part of that journey, helping you understand the truth.
Yeah. And of course, never be fooled by Jeremiah Peabody's pleasant tasting green and purple pills. All right. You are listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees. You can reach us at 702-660-7000. Have a wonderful week. We'll be back next week on Wealth Talks.